This is part 2 of my new books coming in 2025 video, because there are too many books for one video, and a fat TBR is both a happy and a beautiful TBR. If you missed part 1, I covered the books coming in January to March of 2025, and now I'm covering April onwards. And I'm really glad it took me a few weeks to make part 2 of this video, because an absolutely massive, exciting and quite divisive author has announced her new book between the filming of part 1 and part 2. You'll have to watch to the very end to find out exactly who I'm talking about, but along the way you'll learn my most anticipated release of the year, and there are some amazing authors with incredible CVs. So let's start with a Booker International Prize winner. Coming on April 4th, Our City That Year by Gitanjali Suri, translated from Hindi by Daisy Rockwell. This is loosely based on the gathering violence that led to the demolition of the Babri Mosque by the religious extremist in 1992. An unnamed city, violence is erupting between Hindus and Muslims. As their identities sharpens, friends and colleagues turn against each other. Hospital beds fill up and classrooms empty out. Curfews are imposed. Residents flee en masse. 3 intellectuals find themselves paralysed by anxiety and fear. Shruti, a creative writer, spends her time writing and rewriting the same sentence. Hanif is sidelined by his academic department for his own beliefs, and Sharad finds it increasingly difficult to connect with Hanif, his childhood friend. The only one left to bear witness is this novel's unnamed narrator, who hurries to transcribe everything that is happening. Also on April 1st is Out of the Woods by Gretchen Schrimm. Working as a secretary for a judge in The Hague, a woman sits through the trial of a military man charged with war crimes. She becomes increasingly moved by the testimony of the witness and plagued by doubts of the defendant's guilt. I love this. I always wonder how judges and juries can possibly be impartial when presented with such horrible crimes and such terrible images. The Night Trembles by Nadia Terranova, translated from Italian by Anne Goldstein. 2 stories converge in the aftermath of the devastating 1908 earthquake in Sicily and Calabria. A young woman sees a chance to avoid her impending arranged marriage, and a boy manages to escape from the influence and abuse of a mother on the verge of madness. 11-year-old Nicola is tied up in a cellar by his mother each night. There he waits for the sun to rise, and with it a sliver of freedom. On the other side of the sea, Barbara has just arrived in Messina and plans to escape her father, who pulls her towards marriage with a man she does not love. On December 28, 1908, the earth shakes. Europe's most devastating earthquake razes the cities of Messina and Reggio Calabria, and along with them, everything Nicola and Barbara have known. From the ruins, each must place together a life and start anew. Nadia Terranova is by all accounts a genius, but it is Anne Goldstein, the translator of Elena Ferrante, that has grabbed my eye. She must be an in-demand translator, and you know if she wants to work with you, it must be an exciting novel. Lovers of Franz K. by Berna Summers, translated from Kurdish by Seema Hesel. While the young uprising sweeps across Europe, a debate about Franz Kafka appears in student magazines, arguing that publishing the text that Kafka left behind against his will is unfaithful to his legacy. When Kafka's best friend Bode is injured by an attempted assassination, assailant Ferdy is captured and questioned by Commissioner Muller at the West Berlin police station. As his interrogation proceeds, Ferdy's background is revealed piece by piece, from the love story between him and his childhood friend Amalea to their shared passion for Kafka, which leads them to join a radical group. But when a shocking discovery is made about the person who ultimately set Brode's attempted murder in motion, Ferdy and Muller agree to work together to expose the truth. ASL by Jeanne Thornton. 1998. Lilith, Sash and Abraxa are teenagers making Saga of the Sorceress, a game that will change everything, if only for the 3 of them. 18 years later, Lilith might be the first trans woman ever to work as an assistant loan underwriter. Sash is working as a research assistant and part-time webcam dominatrix. Both are working in Brooklyn, and neither knows that the other one is there, or that Abraxia is just across the Hudson River, sleeping on the floor of a friend's grandparents' Jersey City home. They have never met in person, and have been out of touch for years, but none have forgotten the sorceress or her quest. Still far from finished. On April 8th comes Rabbit Moon by Jennifer Haig. 4 years after their bitter divorce, Claire and Aaron get a phone call no parent is prepared for. Their 22-year-old daughter Lindsay, teaching English in China, has been critically injured in a hit-and-run accident. At a Shanghai hospital, they wait at her bedside, hoping for the best but preparing for the worst. What an absolutely horrible premise. That, in combination with Haig's very strong last novel Mercy Street, makes this one of my most anticipated novels of 2025. On the Calculation of Volume by Soljev Bali, translated from Danish by Barbara J. Havland. Every morning she wakes up on the 18th of November. She no longer expects to wake up on the 19th of November. She no longer remembers the 17th. As Tara approaches her 365th 18th of November, she can't shake that feeling that somewhere underneath the surface of this day, there is a way to escape. A Danish Groundhog Day. Auditions by Katie Kitamura. Two people meet for lunch in a Manhattan restaurant. She is an elegant, accomplished actress in rehearsal for an upcoming premiere. He's attractive, troubling, and young enough to be her son. But who is he? And who is she to him? In this compulsively readable, brilliantly constructed novel, two competing narratives unspool, rewriting our understanding of the roles we play every day: partner, parents, creator, muse, and the truth that every performance masks, especially from those who think they know us best. That sounds like it might be an interesting examination of our own assumptions. I mean, our own, the reader's own assumptions. No Name by Greg Hewitt. Inspired by the iconic punk scene of the late 70s, Mike and Peter were no names, two working class boys lost in the shuffle of their stratified town, brought together by their love of music. By 1978, their punk band was blazing across the underground scene, but now in 1993, Mike is a hermit living alone on a dot of an island in the North Atlantic when a mysterious letter from an unlikely fan named Isaac arrives. He's pulled right back into the pain he spent over a decade running from. Isaac longs for an escape from his teenage life. A chance discovery of the No Names catapults him into an obsession over the godlike rockers and the tantalizing possibility of connection. On April 15th comes When the Harvest Comes by Denny Michelle Norris. The venerable, revered Dr. John Freeman did not raise his son Davis to be touched by any man, let alone a white man. He did not raise his son to whisper that man's name with tenderness. But on the eve of his wedding, all Davis can think about is how beautiful he wants to look when he meets his beloved Everett at the altar. Never mind that his mother, who died decades before, and his father, who drove Davis to flee for a freer life in New York City, won't be there to walk him down the aisle. During the wedding reception, David learns that his father has died in a terrible car accident, and years of childhood trauma and unspoken emotions resurface. Phrased by Disha Filwa and Tori Peters. Doesn't that sound like an amazing book? On April 17th comes Name by Constance Debris, translated from French by Laura Elkins, and that is indeed the Laura Elkins who wrote Scaffolding. In the twin worlds of the French bourgeoisie and aristocracy, names are everything. By contrast, our narrator insists on shedding her surname for its association with France's colonial past. She explores how this name is bound to the complex grief she feels for her father's recent passing and her mother's overdose many years earlier, as well as the murky practices of political dynasty. A family life built around substance abuse buries trauma and elitist pride. Back in the Day by Oliver Lovrenski, translated from Norwegian by Nichola Smalley. Ivor and Marco have been getting high since they were 13, started dealing at 14. By 15, they were carrying knives. At 16, they hurtled from one trip to the next, one fight to the next, always watching their back. Ivor dreams of getting out, finishing school, becoming a lawyer, marrying the girl he loves from the corner shop. But the path he's on only leads one way. That sounds bleak. April 22nd, The Fantasies of Future Things by Doug Jones. Two black men are tasked with the destruction and gentrification of several black Atlanta neighborhoods in the lead up to the 1996 Olympics. On April 24th comes Vanishing World by Sayaka Murata, translated from Japanese by Ginny Tapi Tapamore. Vanishing Worlds takes Murata's universe to a bold new level. I am glad to see that she's finally moved away from her conservative ideas then. Imagining an alternative Japan where attitudes towards sex and procreation are wildly different to our own. As a girl, Amane realizes with horror that their parents copulated in order to bring her into the world, rather than using artificial insemination, which became the norm in the mid-20th century. Amane strives to get away from what she considers an indoctrination in this strange system by her mother, but her infatuation with both anime characters and real people has a sexual force that is undeniable. As an adult in an appropriately sexless marriage, sex between marriage couples is now considered as taboo as incest. Amane and her husband Saku decide to go and live in a mysterious new town called Experiment City or Paradise Eden, where all children are raised communally and every person is considered a mother to all children. Men are beginning to become pregnant using artificial wombs that sit outside of their bodies like balloons, and children are nameless. Is this the new world that will purify Amane from her strangeness once and for all? I absolutely love Murata, and this just sounds like more of the same from her, which I am so down for. I love how she's just exploring these same topics again and again from different angles. It just shows you how her mind develops and how many different ways you can think about something. City of Fiction by Yu Hua, translated from Chinese by Todd Foley. In the early 20th century, China is a land undergoing a social and cultural shift, with a 1,000-year-old empire crumbling and a nation on the brink of modernity. Against this backdrop, a quiet man from the north embarks on a perilous journey to a southern city in the grip of a savage snowstorm. He carries with him a newborn, and he is looking for the child's mother and the city that isn't there. This is a story of two: a man who finds unexpected success after having journeyed to the hometown of a woman who abandoned him, and the woman he is searching for, who mysteriously disappears to embark on her own eventful journey. This is a story about vanishing craft and ancient customs, about violence, love and friendship. Above all, it's a story about change and storytelling itself, full of vivid characters, surprising twists, an epic tale, a gripping classic adventure story. Ordinary Saints by Neve Nee Malone. Can you imagine it? I'd say to them. Can you imagine me there in the front row in St. Peter's Square, the lesbian sister of a literal saint? Brought up in a devout household in Ireland, Jay is now living in London with his girlfriend, determined to live day by day and not think too much about either the future or the past. But when she learns that her beloved older brother, who died in a terrible accident, may be made into a Catholic saint, she realizes that she must at last confront her family, her childhood, and herself. Oh, I really do want to read that book. Fun and Games by John Patrick McHugh. 17-year-old John Masterson has no idea what he wants. It's his last summer on the small island where he has grown up, and he should be enjoying the weeks until his exam results comes through. Instead, he's working mind-numbing shifts at the local hotel and trying to keep his head down after his mother's nude sext to another man was leaked to the whole island. As John joins the local senior football team, he gets caught up in fights and parties and embarks on a tentative relationship with his slightly older co-worker Amber that he feels both proud and ashamed of. He can almost pretend that his summer will last forever. But soon John must face up to the choices: stay or leave, to stand out or fit in, and whether to love and let himself be loved, despite or perhaps because of the flaws that make us all human. Dark comedy is very hard to get right, but when it is done well, it is an absolutely amazing genre. I Remember Lights by Ben Ladouceur. In summer 1967, love is all you need. But some forms of love are criminal. As the spectacular Euro 67 celebrations take place, a young man new to Montreal learns about gay life from cruising partners, one-night stands, live-in lovers, and friends. Once Expo begins, he finds romance with a charismatic visitor, but their time is limited. When the fireworks wither into smoke, so do their options. A decade later, during the notorious 1977 police raid on a gay bar called Trucks, he comes to understand even more about the bitter choices, so often made by men like him, between happiness and safety. That sounds happy. Hunger by Choi Jin Young, translated from Korean by Soj. How should I proceed after I wrap up this story? What should I do? Could I go to the police station and confess? Could I find a priest and confess? I ate a person. Is that a sin? This story begins with death, when Dam finds the body of her soulmate Yu, bruised and battered on the street by a gang of government department debt collectors. She is paralysed with grief. As she cradles his corpse in her deflated arms, Dan begins to tell a story. In a fragmented sequence of monologues and meditations, this unexpected novella slowly builds into a panoramic portrait of two like souls who have passed a lifetime in utter devotion to one another. It's a story that snakes between past and present. As she narrates, Dam is committing one final act to the tale of their undying love. Dam is slowly eating Gu, whose body she has lovingly washed, embalmed, and elected to preserve inside of her own, where he will rest for all eternity. At once romantic and horrific, Hunger is a modern fable of metaphysical love, cutting to the very heart of existence lost, and how ferociously we rage, tooth and nail, against our own mortality. This sounds like the perfect blending of romance and horror, two genres I don't really associate together. This is a bestseller in Korea and has been compared to Hang Kang, and despite never having read this author before, this is calling me, and just for the premise alone, this is one of my most anticipated reads of the year. Sister Europe by Neil Zink. Sister Europe tells the story of one wild night in Berlin as a ragtag group meets at the Hotel Intercontinental to celebrate an elderly author's career, all under the resolute assurance that their wealthy host will provide a free and fancy dinner. Inevitably, boredom, hunger, and horniness all set in, and the gang, a young trans teen and her father, an aging publisher and his flaky date, a dog, a troubled heiress, and an Arabic prince, are flung out on an extraordinary odyssey through the city's shadows and lights. Sophisticated, sexy, and exquisitely moving, Sister Europe is a vivid tale of a scene all at sea and a continent whirled with charm, caprice, and the arches of history. Open Haven by Sean Hewitt. On a rural island in Britain, James, a shy 16-year-old, is alone in his newly discovered sexuality. He begins to realise how his feelings threaten to separate him from his family and community. Then James meets Luke, slightly older, handsome, unkept, and with a reputation for danger. April 29th. Nightingale by Laura Elvery. At the age of 90, Florence Nightingale is frail and no longer of sound mind. After a storied career as a nurse, writer, and statistician, she now leads a reclusive existence. One summer evening, she is astonished to receive a visitor, Silas Bradley, a young man who claims to have met her in the Crimean War 50 years ago. But how could this be? And how does the elusive Jeanne Thornton connect their two lives? Howling Woman by Shelby Hint. Fleeing violence, Sabine returns to New Mexico where she meets Howling Woman, a woman who has never surrendered to the brutality of men. Later, now on bail and awaiting child, Sabine attempts to set the record straight about the man she shot. Coming on May 1st is Parallel Lines by Edward St. Auburn. Sebastian and Olivia meet only once, by chance, at a party, without knowing their relationship to one another. Olivia, adopted at birth by two North London psychoanalysts, had had a life of love and privilege. Her twin Sebastian spent his early adulthood between hospital and halfway houses, trying to navigate the destructive inner voices that are the legacy of his childhood. When the siblings are brought together for their second time by their birth mother, in a misguided attempt at transparency that leaves Sebastian spiralling, a chain of events is set in motion that asks questions of every member of the extended family and all of their friends, with themes of nature, nurture, intergenerational trauma, healing, and what a happy family might look like. On May 6th comes Golf by Mo Ogrodnik, the interconnected stories of 5 women who must navigate the difficulties but realities as women of the Arabian Gulf. A wealthy Saudi housewife and new mother becomes disillusioned with her marriage and rebels against all form of domesticity. A newly arrived Filipino housekeeper is haunted by the floods that claimed her child. An art curator confronts her complicity and privilege within the region's complex history. An isolated Syrian woman seeks love within her arranged marriage with an ISIS fighter. An Ethiopian girl strives to forge her own path after fleeing a life that she did not want. My Name is Amelia de Valle by Isabel Allende, translated by Francis Riddle. San Francisco, 1866, an Irish nun is abandoned after a relationship with a Chilean aristocrat and gives birth to a daughter named Amelia de Valle. To pursue her passion for writing, she is willing to defy social norms, writing pulp fiction and pursuing a journalistic career where she meets the talented reporter Eric. Amelia and Eric travel to Chile to report on the civil war there, but Amelia begins to uncover the truth about her father and the country that represents her roots. The River is Waiting by Wally Lamb. New fatherhood, the loss of his job, and an addiction has thrown Corby's marriage to Emily into a tailspin before the tragedy that sentenced Corby to prison. Corby struggles to witness the violence of life on the inside, but a friendship with the prison's librarian and a teenage inmate, as well as his mother's enduring faith in him, means Corby begins to hope that mercy and reconciliation might still be possible. But can his crimes ever be forgiven by those he loves? On May 8th comes Gunk by Saba Sams. Jules has been divorced from Lennon for 5 years, but still works alongside him at Gunk, the grotty student nightclub. Leon flirts with students on the dance floor and hires a 19-year-old Nim to work behind the bar with Jules. Nim, with her shaven head and steady paw, her disarming sweetness and sudden disappearance, and Jules finds herself jolted awake. When Nim discovers she's pregnant, Julie agrees to help. As the months pass and the relationship between the two women grows increasingly intimate and perplexing, it emerges that Nim has her own unexpected gift. Now with a small flat, Jules is holding a baby just 24 hours old who still smells of Nim, but no one knows where Nim is or if she is coming back. What could the future for Jules, Nim and this unnamed baby possibly look like? Sam's has such provocative titles. For those of you unaware, Gunk is a slang term meaning testicle juice. I loved Send Nudes, and that is very rare for me and short story collections, so I'm really looking forward to this one. This is another one of my most anticipated reads of the year. The Names by Florence Knapp. Cora sets out with her 9-year-old daughter to register the birth of her son. Her husband intends her to follow a long-standing tradition and call the boy after him, but Cora questions whether it's right for her child to share his name with generations of domineering men. 7 years later, her son Bear, a name chosen by his sister. Or is it Julian, the name his mother set her heart on, believing it would give him the opportunity to become his own person? Or is it Gordon, named after his father and raised in his image? But is there still a chance to break the mould? This is the story of 3 names, 3 versions of a life, and the infinite possibilities that a single decision can spark. It is the story of one family and how love endures, no matter what fate hath in store. On May 13th comes A Sharp Endless Need by Marisa Crane. Star point guard's Mac's senior year begins with the death of her father and the arrival of Liv. On the court, Mac and Liv discover a game-winning chemistry. Off the court, they fall into an equally intoxicating more than friendship that is out of bounds in their small town, especially for Liv's conservative mother. Mac's desire and grief collides with drugs, sex, the looming college signing deadlines, and the fight for the life she wants for herself, whether or not Liv will be on the court beside her. On May 15th comes The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. Hay stands on a bridge in pelting rain, ready to jump, when he hears somebody shout across the river. Grazina, a widow succumbing to dementia, convinces him to take another path. Bereft and out of options, he quickly becomes her caretaker. Over the course of the year, the unlikely pair develop a life-altering bond, one built on empathy, spiritual reckoning, and heartbreak, with the power to alter his relationship to himself, his family, and the community at the brink. I love an unlikely friendship, and a novel with a tiny light of hope amid all that darkness. A Family Matter by Claire Lynch. Heron has just had the sort of visit to the doctors that turns a life upside down. Telling Maggie, his only daughter, and the person that his life revolves around for so long, seems impossible. Heron can't tell her about the diagnosis, and he can't tell her all the other things he's been keeping from her for these years either. 40 years earlier, Dawn is a young mother adjusting to life in her new husband's house. When Hazel breathes into her life, it's the kind of connection that is impossible to resist, and suddenly life is much more complicated and more joyful than she ever expected. But Dawn has responsibilities. She has commitments. Dawn has Maggie. Bitter Honey by Lola Akinmade Akerstrom. 1978. A scholarship draws Nancy from Gambia's warmth into Sweden's winter. Her friendship with Lars begins to blossom into something more, but Nancy is about to discover the danger of being drawn into Lars's world. 2006. Tina is the sweet-hearted pop princess, but beneath her glittering facade, Tina is desperate to discover who she really is. Her mother Nancy seems desperate to keep her past under wraps. Goldengrove by Patrick McCabe. The summer of Brexit and the recently retired Meredith looks back on his years running a theatrical agency in Dublin in the 1960s with a flamboyant fellow Brit, Henry Plume. What their clients don't know is that both men are active agents for the British state, posted to Dublin to identify and infiltrate terrorist networks. When Plum is found floating in his bath with his skull beaten in, Meredith realises that as far as Irish society is concerned, the past is never dead, and as a wise man once observed, it's not even past. May 22nd. Ripeness by Sarah Moss. Edith, sent by her mother, travels to rural Italy with strict instructions to see her sister, ballet dancer Lydia, through the final weeks of her pregnancy, help at the birth, and then make a phone call which will seal the baby's faith and his mother's. Decades later, Edith's best friend Mabe receives a call from an American man claiming to be her brother. Mabe must decide if she's willing to meet him. Sarah Moss is a quality author. Trust her to write something well more than simply worth reading. May 25th, Where You Go, I Will Follow by Christina Frantz. 1980. Kinshasa. Mira falls in love with an impoverished singer, a criminal in the eyes of her parents. 2004, London. Bayou is a young British Congolese woman living with her Pentecostal auntie, Tontine Muriel. She plays the role of an obedient child going to prayer meetings, but Bayou has a secret. She's in love with a woman. When her auntie wants her to marry one of the young men from church, Bayou has to make a decision. On May 27th comes Disappoint Me by Nicola Dinan. Max 30, a poet and overpaid legal counsel with a lifetime of dysphoria and fuckboys rattling around in her head, plagued with a deep dissatisfaction, takes a spill down the stairs and decides to make some changes. First things first, a stab at good old-fashioned heteronormativity. Max thinks she's found the answer in Vincent, a corporate lawyer whose Chinese parents never pictured their son dating a trans woman. Vincent cares for Max in a way she's long given up on, yet Vincent is carrying his own baggage from a gap year in Thailand a decade prior. On May 29th comes Let Me Go Mad in My Own Way by Elaine Feeney. Claire's life has been on hold since she broke up with Tom and moved back home to the rugged west of Ireland to care for her dying father. A couple of years later, Claire learns that Tom has moved nearby for work. She must decide if he has come for her or for himself and unravel what went wrong in their past. As the violence of past collides with the mundane realities of Claire's everyday life, she must confront whether she can escape her history or if she is destined to be immobilized by it forever. Exploring layers of violence, the lost voice of women, the post-colonial repercussions of that violence, and the way it can grip generations. Will the secrets revealed alter the course of Claire's future? And can love exist in a place of pain? Feeney's last novel, How to Build a Boat, is one of my all-time favourites. The only book I have read twice in 1 year. I want to read this book even if somebody else wrote it. I really like the description. But knowing that Feeney wrote it, this isn't one of my most anticipated books of the year. This is my most anticipated book of 2025. June 3rd, The Incarnation of Rebellion by Vaishnavi Patel. Kalki's father has been lost in the brutal hunt for rebels. Young men are drafted to fight wars they will never return from, and the people of her city are more interested in fighting each other than facing their oppressors. Kalki and her friends begin to play a dangerous game, obtaining jobs working for the British while secretly planning to destroy the empire from the inside. Facing threats from all corners, Kalki must decide whether it's more important to be a hero or to survive. Endling by Reva. Ukraine, 2022. Yeva, a maverick scientist, scours the country for rare snails, while her relatives urge her to give up and to settle down. They don't know Yeva dates plenty of men to fund her work, entertaining Westerners who come to the Ukraine on romance tours, believing they'll find docile brides untamed by feminism and modernity. Nastia and her sister Salome are also in the marriage industry, while secretly searching for their missing mother, a protester who vanished after years of fierce activism against the romance tours. But the plans of these three women come to a screeching halt when Russia invades. Both a comedy and a horror. And I love that it's a Ukrainian novel where another issue is getting higher billing than the invasion. While it is a super important event, there is more to life in the Ukraines than simply Russian soldiers. Flashlight by Susan Choi. Louisa 10 was walking with her father on the beach. Later she is found washed up, barely alive. Her father is missing. Louisa is an only child. Her father, Cirque, Korean-born and raised in Japan, lost touch with his family when they moved to Pyongyang. Her mother, Anne, is estranged from her family. Tobias, Anne's illegitimate son, whose reappearance in their life will have astonishing consequences. What really happened to Louisa's father, and why did he take Louisa and her mother to Japan just before he disappeared? Deep House, the gayest love story ever told, by Jeremy Atherton Lin. Look at that cover. Now, this is an important life lesson. Feel free to walk around your house naked all you want, but do not heat oil without wearing underpants. I am switching to the European cover for safety reasons right now. A binational relationship through pivotal years in the marriage equality debate. In 1996, Jeremy meets the boy of his dreams, nicknamed Famous, just as Congress prepares the Defense of Marriage Act, denying same-sex couples federal rights, including immigration, layering their experiences with those of past outliers, including his parents' interracial romance. Jeremy explores the many forms of intimacy and questions the mechanics that legitimize love. The Brittle Age by Donatella Di Parentano, translated from Italian by Anne Goldstein. 1990. Deep in the mountains of central Italy, a brutal crime shatters the peace of a local community. 2 women are murdered, a third left for dead. The only survivor is 20-year-old Lucia's best friend. Now Lucia is a physiotherapist, separated from her husband, her only daughter Amanda studying in Milan. When the pandemic forces Amanda to return to the family home and Lucia's memories are awakened. A psychological family drama that weaves Lucia's and Amanda's personal struggles with the mystery of a tragedy. I'll be honest, that doesn't sound like anything special, but Anne Goldstein as translator, that's got me thinking it's worthwhile paying attention to at the very least. June 5th. Misinterpretation by Leda Zog. In New York, an Albanian interpreter reluctantly agrees to work with Elfreg, a Kosovo torture survivor, during his therapy sessions, and she becomes entangled in her client's struggles and stirs up her own buried memories, and impulsively attempts to help a Kurdish poet. She takes a spontaneous trip to Albania, where her life in the United States is put into stark relief, and when she returns, she must question what is real and what is not. Helm by Sarah Hall. Helm is a ferocious, mysterious wind, a subject of folklore and awe, told through the stories of those who have obsessed over this phenomenon. Helm's extraordinary history is formed. The Neolithic tribe who tried to placate Helm, the Dark Age wizard priest who wanted to banish Helm, the Victorian steam engineer who attempted to capture Helm, and the farmer's daughter who loved Helm. Now, Dr. Selma fears human population is killing Helm. That sounds unique. I loved Burnt Coat by Sarah Hall, so I'll be interested to see what she does with this premise. On June 12th comes Sarawate by Gurnak Jola. Centuries ago, the holy river Sarawate flowed through Punjab. When Satnam arrived in his ancestral village for his grandmother's funeral, he finds water in a dried up well behind the house, setting in motion a scheme to unearth a lost river as an act of Hindu nationalist pride. As legends and histories resurface, the distant relatives, a Canadian eco-saboteur, a Mauritanian pest extermination, and a Bollywood stunt double are brought together in a rapidly changing India. Ordinary Love by Marie Ratsuki. When Emily spots Jennifer Hall, she is transported back to the moment when they fell in love as teenagers 20 years before. Now Jen is an Olympic runner, while Emily has 2 young children and a wealthy husband, Jack. But Jack's controlling behaviour is spiralling, and Emily has lost sight of who she once was. Jen and Emily are drawn back together by the magnetic attraction they had as teenagers. June 17th, Crown by Evanthia Bromiley. Pregnant, jobless, and mother of twins, Jude Woods is on the brink of eviction. She has 3 days to find a safe place to live. In their quiet trailer park, neighbours keep to themselves, but an eviction notice slapped on the front door screams. Jude's contractions flare and she is rushed to hospital, instructing Evan and Virginia to hide in their car in the surrounding fields. If the children are discovered outside and alone, they will be taken from her. As Jude labours through the night, her twins strike out along the dangerous riverbank in search of a new home. As night heralds towards the morning's lockout, both mother and children reckon with what it means to live and dream in a modern America, insistent on slamming doors. Girls, Girls, Girls by Shoshana von Blackness. Summer 1996. Best friends and secret girlfriends, Hannah and Sam, are driving across the country from Long Beach, New York, to the queer paradise of San Francisco, free from the harsh gaze of their neighbours and the stifling demands of Hannah's Orthodox Jewish mother. In San Francisco, they will finally be together as a real couple, but the financial strain of West Coast living pushes the girls to start stripping, and Hannah feels trapped. Sam wants her at the club, but Hannah hates stripping nearly as much as she hates disappointing Sam. Then Hannah meets Chris, an older butch lesbian. Hannah is intrigued by Chris and the chance to escape the leering men of the strip club. When Hannah proposes an escort arrangement with Chris and Sam makes new queer friends, a rift forms between the two. June 19th. Love Forms by Claire Adam. Trinidad, 1980. Dawn Bishop, age 16, leaves her home and journeys across the sea to Venezuela. There she gives birth to a baby girl and leaves her with nuns to be given up for adoption. Dawn tries to carry on with her life. A move to England, marriage, career, 2 sons, divorce. Through it all, she thinks of the child she had in Venezuela and what might have been. 40 years later, a woman from an internet forum gets in touch. On June 26th comes These Heathens by Mia Mackenzie. Great title. 1960 Georgia, and 17-year-old Doris travels to Atlanta for an abortion. While waiting to hear from the doctor who has agreed to perform the procedure, Doris spends the weekend scandalised by but drawn to women who dance close together, atheists. She meets Dexter, who shows her the Atlanta civil rights movement, where some activists practice non-violence while others carry guns. Doris suddenly finds herself surrounded by so many people who seem to know exactly who they are or what they want. Doris knows that she doesn't want the baby, but what does she want? July 1st, The Originals by Nell Stevens, an unwanted guest of her uncle's family home. Grace has grown up on the periphery of her once great household. She has a love for painting, particularly forgery, and for other girls. When her long-lost cousin Charles, presumed dead at sea, returns, a rift emerges between family members who claim he is an imposter and Grace's auntie, who insists he is her son. Grace must decide who to believe and who to pretend to believe. In deciphering the truth about her cousin, she comes to understand who deserves to be rich, what family means to queer people, and the value of authenticity in art and in love. I bet Charles is a girl dressed up as a boy and Grace likes her. Apologies if that is actually the twist and I've spoiled the book there. I've not read it, obviously. It's not out for another 6 months. On July 10th comes The Girl Who Grew Big by Layla Motley. When Adela Wood tells her parents she's pregnant, they immediately send her 1,000 miles away to stay with her grandmother in Padua Beach. The intention is that she will leave her baby there and resume her suburban life 9 months later, but Adela's plans are soon washed away by the tide. Adela meets a new mother determined to defy expectations and return to high school, newborn strapped to her chest. Then she meets a group of young mothers who create a village together in the back of a red truck, dancing, breastfeeding and raising their children by themselves. Doesn't sound as dark as Motley's first book, but I look forward to seeing how the youngest ever author to be Booker longlisted matures as an author and what she does with her considerable talent. One of my most anticipated releases of the year. On July 17th, The Other Wife by Jackie Thomas Kennedy. Zuzu has the life she's always dreamed of, a beautiful house, child, successful partner, but something between her and her wife has been off for a long time. She can't help but to wonder if she chose wrong at every turn. Living with her white mother over her black father in the divorce, becoming a lawyer rather than an artist. Marrying Agnes despite her feelings for her male best friend Cash. When an unexpected loss takes her to her hometown, the what-ifs in her mind become too loud to ignore. On July 22nd comes Necessary Fiction by Alagoshi Osunde. Across Lagos, characters seek out love for self and their partners, even as they risk ruining relationships with parents, spouses, families, and friends. Our characters grapple with desire, fear, time, death, and God, forming and breaking unexpected connections, in the process unveiling how they know each other and have loved each other and had their hearts broken in that pursuit. As they work to establish themselves in the city's world of art, music, and creative commerce, we meet their collective and individual attempts to reckon with the necessary fiction they carry for survival. On July 29th comes The Dance and the Fire by Daniel Saldana Paris, translated from Spanish by Christina McSweeney. Three friends bound by an erotic past reunite in a city that becomes engulfed by wildfires. I love that cover, and the description reminds me of the performance by Claire Thomas, only sexier. August 5th comes The Hounding by Zenobi Purvis. Little Nettlebed is a village steeped in the uncanny, strange creatures that wash up on the riverbed, ravens gather on the roof of people about to die, the villagers start to hear barking, and one claims to see the Mansfield sisters transform into dogs before his very eyes. And then allegations spark fascination and fear. The inhabitants of Little Nedbet have never much liked the Mansfield girls. A little odd, even if local beliefs in witchcraft is waning, and aversion to difference is as widespread as ever. And these conflicting narratives all point to the same ultimate conclusion. Something isn't right, and the sisters will be the ones to pay. On August 12th comes The Sunflower Boys by Sam Watchman. A young boy is wrestling with his sexuality as war breaks out in modern Ukraine. I don't think I need to say anything more about this book for you to want to pick it up. On August 26th comes Three Parties by Zayed Saad. A queer Palestinian refugee plans to come out at his elaborate birthday party dinner in this reimagining of Mrs. Dalloway. Surely that at least has you a little bit intrigued. And finally, as a thank you for watching all the way through, on September 23rd, the brilliant and very strong flavours of Patricia Lockwood have announced the release of Will There Ever Be Another You? A young woman, mind misfiring from a mysterious disease, stunned by a devastating loss, is trying to keep the pieces of her families together. She is afraid of her floorboards, and what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. I can't sing, I'm sorry, plays over and over in her ears. She hates her friends, or more accurately, she doesn't know who they are. Has the illness stolen her old mind and given her a new one? Does it mean she'll get up and start over from scratch? A chance afforded to very few people. The very weaves of herself seem to have loosened, time and memories passed straight through her body. I'm sorry not to respond to your email, she writes, but I live completely in the present now. Will There Ever Be Another You is the brain-shredding story of one woman disillusioned with her attempts to create a new way of thinking, as well as a profound investigation into what keeps us alive, in times of disorientation and loss, from one of our most original writers. Lockwood is hilarious, intelligent, and a real love it or hate it author. Personally, I love her, so this is one of my most anticipated reads of the year. But I want to acknowledge that some people aren't going to find a woman who is scared of her own floorboards hilarious. And if that's you, I will never understand you. You probably hate puppies and think licorice is something pleasant. No, but seriously, she's very, very popular and very, very unpopular at the same time. I'm going to finish this video with a little mini rant, but first I want to thank and acknowledge my wonderful Patreons for their support and for our fun book club that they help create. In making these two videos about books coming in 2025, I think I read well over 200 descriptions of various novels, a lot of them from authors I am completely unfamiliar with, and the quality of the writings of these blurbs were just terrible. Missing words, sentences that didn't make sense, sentences that read backwards. The description is the #1 marketing tool. It's the thing that I use to decide if I'm going to read a book. And when a book is published, it is line edited and proofread by multiple people. And books are like 300 pages long. So why not do the same thing for the 3 paragraphs of the blurb? It is unprofessional, it reflects badly on the author's talents, and it's letting them down and impacting upon sales. There were books I didn't plug because I couldn't figure out what was going on in the blurb. So we're not just talking about small errors here. Rant over. Thank you for watching. I hope you found a book or 70 to add to your TBR. Let me know if you're anticipating a book that I missed in the comment section. Bye bye.